Is this thing? Yes, it's all right. Romans chapter 13, verse 7 and 8. Actually, it's going to be just one little part of verse 8. I'm going to go back to verse 7 just a little bit because we're talking about honoring those who are in authority over us within the government. And Paul says in Romans 13:7, give everyone what you owe him. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. Let no debt remain outstanding, except the continuing debt to love one another. For he who loves his fellow man has fulfilled the law. Literally, that first part of verse 8 says, do not keep on owing anyone anything. Anybody here have credit card debt? Student loan debt, mortgage, car payments. Yeah, no car payments. Yeah, good. You guys are an exceptional crowd. Because typically, if you were to ask that question, probably 75 to 80% of the people would raise their hands. Verse 8 isn't really about debt and the repayment of debt as much as it is about love. But because I touched on the national debt last week and how it can genuinely affect all of our lives, I couldn't resist but address the issue of debt this morning, both nationally and personally. Debt is a real problem, not a real solution. Debt is a real problem, not a real solution. On a national level, every time the feds give us another quantitative easing by increasing the money supply, it's like me trying to start my lawnmower without any gas in it. I can pull on that rope all day long, and I'm thinking, there must be something wrong with my lawnmower because it won't start. There's no gas in the tank, and it won't start. I don't know why. So what do? I get a can of ether, and I give it a little shot in the carburetor, and I'll pull on the rope, and lo and behold, it runs. Then it dies off again. That's quantitative easing. It's a shot of ether into a carburetor that's got no gas in it. We need gas. Now, I'm sorry, this doesn't sound like a very Christian sermon this morning. It's not a lot about Jesus. However, debt severely affects Christianity. And the reason it does is because people in debt, believers in debt, can't serve Christ the way they should. They can't give the way they want to because debt is strangling them. I've got an overhead to show you, but we're being technically challenged this morning. So I'm just going to give you the numbers. And this has to do with what we're getting politically about our economy. And you've probably seen this if any of you are on email. Somebody's probably already sent this to you. But just for the benefit of the congregation here, I want to share where the United States is currently. U.S. tax revenue is at $2.17 trillion. That's what's coming in. What the budget is, well, they actually don't have a budget for last, I don't know for how long. But the budget runs at about $3.82 trillion. Okay, you following me? Income, debt, or our budget. New debt, pay the interest on the old debt, is $1.6 trillion. The national debt is running at $14,271 billion. And our recent budget cuts to help alleviate our debt problem is $38,500 million. Now, take off 8 zeros and bring it down to our level and apply it to a typical household. Annual family income, $21,700. Money the family spent, $38,200 spent. New debt on credit cards, $16,500. Outstanding balance on the credit card, $142,710. And the total budget cuts so far, $38.50. That's where our country is right now. And unfortunately, a lot of individuals are in that same boat. On a personal level, the average family has over $7,000 in credit card debt. And 46% carry a balance month to month. Plus, the average mortgage of about $75,000. Often college loans, car loans, RV loans, shoe loans, food loans, everything goes on plastic. We've heard that the personal debt has been going down as of late, but it's not because it's being repaid, it's because of default. So when you hear these wonderful things coming over the radio, oh man, we're finally, things are turning around, the personal debt's going down. It's not because the people are repaying, they have so much money they can repay those debts, it's because it's going into default. They're losing their homes, their credit cards are being taken away, their cars are being repossessed, their debt level actually is going down, they're going into bankruptcy, but it's not because they're not, you get the point. Capital for investment in business or the purchase of a potentially appreciating asset may require that one take a risk and go into debt. But the end view in this is profitability and an ongoing income through that, though that end is not guaranteed unless you happen to get into a government-subsidized green business. In that case, you at least have a short-term guarantee until market forces bring reality to bear upon that business. I'm sorry, guys. I just had to let it go one of these days, Let's build a whole bunch of solar panels and anyway. And I live on solar panels, so I'm not down on solar panels. I'm down in the idea that the market should actually determine what things are made and when they're made and all of that. James 4:13 tells us that business profit may not always be God's will. We can go to get into business, but James says that humility has to come first. We go into business with humility, and then maybe God will bless it. In today's consumerism mindset, many never think to pay for something outright. They pull out the credit card, make the minimum monthly payment, and never think in terms of paying it off. On any substantial amount, any balance that's on a credit card, if you just made the minimum payments, it would take you about 50 to 55 years to pay off that debt. If you just made the minimum payment. In the meantime, interest is accruing at an incredible rate. TV ads for car sales don't tell you how much you have to pay for the car. They tell you how much your monthly payment's going to be, right? $199 down to $199 a month for 84 months, Buy a room of furniture for only so many dollars a month. Or better yet, rent to own. That's always a good one. The mindset is to get as much stuff as you can on payments and have as many payments as you can afford in an effort to prop up an image, a facade, or a facade of success and prestige, or to pursue happiness. The end of the rainbow. You always pursuing happiness is like looking for the end of a rainbow. When you get there, it's not there. And you don't find happiness through going into debt. We are told that making those monthly payments protects our credit rating, assures that more and more payments can be made and more debt accumulated. We are told that the facade of success will bring success, that you've got to have money to make money. We're bombarded with the latest and greatest. For only so many payments of this much a month, you can have this thing. Now, I have a practical illustration this morning. And you know what the real hook is discontentment, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is the coolest ladder. It turns into a step ladder. It can, you can raise this part up, and you push this thing, and it becomes this, and all of that. And man, I saw that at Costco. I thought, this has replaced about 4 junky ladders I got at home. I thought, this would be awesome. And this is just so cool. And it's real stable. I really like this ladder. I love this ladder, actually. It's a great ladder. Until yesterday, when I watched the new infomercial on the latest and greatest Mega Light Extreme. And this thing did 4 more things than mine does. And suddenly I'm thinking, oh, bummer, I shouldn't have bought this one. I should have waited and bought the Max Extreme, On that one, you've got a handle, and it's got this paint bucket that goes with it, and this step that folds down. It's just so cool. I needed it. Well, anyway.
When you get your new one, I'll buy that one from you.
Okay. When I get my new one. He said when I get my new one, he'll buy that one from me for half price. That sounds about right. Yeah.
I'm cheap.
Okay.
Yeah, love your neighbor. Give it to me. There you go.
Can you relate with that, though? I mean, can you relate with that?
Oh, yeah.
I think everybody can. There's a discontentment in this. Man, if I just had gotten now I'm going to have to get another one.
And buyer's remorse.
It is. I've got a garage full of buyer's remorse. I've got a boat. The 2 happiest days for a boater are the day they buy it and the day they sell it. And I haven't been able to sell mine, so it just sits there as a reminder. At least I'm not making payments on it. So what we need this morning is we need a biblical view about debt and loans. We need to get God's mind about what debt is about. Now this is going to be, settle in, because this is going to take a little bit, because we've got to look at a little history. We've got to look through some scriptures and things. So debt, biblical view of debt, especially the Old Testament. The law of Moses didn't contemplate any raising of money by loans to obtain investment capital. And bankers and sureties in the commercial sense were unknown in the early ages of the Hebrews. Later, there were people in Rome, for instance, because this is written in the context of Rome, who were wealthy individuals, and they would make loans. They were kind of individual bankers. There's a whole lot of history that goes on there, and I'm not going to go that direction. But as the family of God, under the covenant that God made with Israel, Israel was to work together for the mutual survival and prosperity under the watchful, jealous eye of God. God would bless or God would curse their nation, their community, based upon their obedience and loyalty to Him. Debt for the nation of Israel is generally thought of as resulting from a curse from God for disobedience. To be in debt in the Old Testament mindset is a result of a curse. This would affect the individuals in the nations. But even under God's blessing, there were poor. The poor were viewed as opportunities for those who had much to demonstrate their gratitude to God and faith in His ongoing provision by sharing their wealth. Debt was not a way to have more stuff, the way we think about it. Things could go so bad that you'd have to borrow just to stay alive. That's where debt came in. Things got bad, you needed money, you needed food, you had to borrow to stay alive. And that was because of a curse. As a nation, Moses put up 2 options before the people: obey and be blessed, disobey and be cursed. What don't you get about those 2 options? One sign of blessing was no debt. Deuteronomy 25:12-15. The Lord will open the heavens, the storehouse of His bounty, to send rain in your land in season. This should be making you think about some of the latest news stuff we've been hearing. Will make it rain on your land in season, and to bless all the work of your hands. You will lend to many nations, but will borrow from none. If you're blessed, you're going to be one who's helping others. You're helping other nations. During World War II, when Britain was up against the ropes with Nazi Germany coming in and just trying to wipe them out, the Lend-Lease program came into being. And we were able to send incredible amounts of help to Great Britain. And then eventually we became part of that war also. But it's because the Lord was blessing us. We had money in the bank. We were able to help others. God, in this text, basically, God will assure that nature will cooperate to make you productive in your work. Wouldn't that be great? I mean, to go out and actually have, instead of fighting nature, and I'm using nature in a, it's God's nature, okay? Not
mother.
But the rain and the sun, it's all going to cooperate to help you in your desire to be a productive person and a productive nation. Tornadoes and hurricanes and, floods and all that stuff are held at bay under God's blessing. The Lord will make you the head, not the tail. If you pay attention to the commands of the Lord your God that I give you this day and carefully follow them, you'll always be at the top and never at the bottom. Isn't that a great place to be? Do not turn aside from any of the commandments I give you today, to the right or to the left, following other gods and serving them. However, if you do not obey the Lord your God and do not carefully follow all his commands and decrees I am giving you today, all these curses will come upon you and overtake you. Well, what is one of the primary curses? We see it in verse 43. The alien who lives among you will rise above you higher and higher, but you will sink lower and lower. He will lend to you, but you will not lend to him. He will be the head, and you will be the tail. Let me ask you, which end of the donkey is more desirable? Huh?
Exactly.
The head or the tail? Which one's more desirable? It stinks to be a borrower because you're in the end. You're in debt. And that's the stinky end of the donkey. Individually within the nation, we live in a broken world where even a blessed nation will have poor within it. Jesus said, the poor you will have with you always. It's just the way it is. There will be those that have some form of incapacity, mental, physical, or some form of disability, disabled from birth, disabled by sickness, disabled from accident. Some may be under personal discipline of the Lord for violations of God ethic, and they be poor. The overarching principle was that together we can make it if we just all pull together unselfishly. In the Mosaic Law, the duty of aiding the poor was strongly emphasized. All loans to fellow Israelites were to be forgiven every 7 years, and usury, or charging interest, was looked upon with deepest contempt. In Deuteronomy 15, 1 through 11, it says, at the end of every 7 years you must cancel debts. And this is how it's to be done. Every creditor shall cancel the loan he has made to his fellow Israelite. How long would you be in the banking business if you did that today? It wouldn't last long. He shall not require payment from his fellow Israelite or brother, because the Lord's time for canceling debts has been proclaimed. You may require payment from a foreigner, but you must cancel any debt your brother owes you. However, there should be no poor among you. For in the land of the Lord your God is giving you to possess as your inheritance, he will richly bless you. If only you fully obey the Lord your God and be careful to follow all these commands I am giving you today. For the Lord your God will bless you as he has promised, and you will lend to many nations, but will borrow from none. You will rule over many nations, but none will rule over you. If there is a poor man among your brothers in any of the towns of the land that the Lord your God is giving you, do not be hard-hearted or tight-fisted toward your poor brother. Rather be open-handed and freely lend him whatever he needs. Big important word right there. Wants, needs. Be careful not to harbor this wicked thought. Oh, the 7th year, the year for canceling debts is near, so that you do not show ill will toward your needy brother and give him nothing. He may then appeal to the Lord against you, and you will be found guilty of sin. Give generously to him, and do so without a grudging heart. Then because of the Lord your God, because of this, the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and in everything you put your hand to. There will always be poor people in the land. Therefore I command you to be open-handed toward the brothers and toward the poor and the needy in your land. The year of Jubilee was a ollie oxen free year. It's a time of canceling of debt. It's a time of new beginnings. It's a time where people get a clean slate, a new start, at the expense of those who had. But why do they have? Because God provided it for them. Here's the thing. The generous understand this. The tight-fisted don't. The generous understand that whatever they have, God gave it to them. And whatever they give away, God can replace. It's God's money, not yours. You see, the hook in a loan is interest. And God prohibited it within his people. In Deuteronomy 23:19, he says, "Do not charge your brother interest, whether on money or food or anything else that may earn interest. You may charge a foreigner interest, but not a brother Israelite, so that the Lord your God may bless you in everything you put your hand to in the land you are entering to possess." Why are they being blessed? Because they're being generous, because they're trusting God for their income. The loaners, the lenders, are trusting God for their income. Therefore, they're generous, which makes God smile. And it causes the blessing to be poured out upon the generous heart. Proverbs 28, verse 8 says, "He who increases his wealth by exorbitant interest amasses it for another, who will be kind to the poor." If you're getting, in this situation, if a wealthy person, sees the hardship that a person's in, it's not that they want a new car or a new boat or anything else. They need food. Something's happened in their life where they are in desperate need, and this wealthy person says, "I'm going to take advantage of that person." And God says, "Oh yeah? You do that, and I'm going to come down on you like a load of bricks." You give open-hearted, generously, open-handedly. Those who did loan to the poor were restricted in what they could keep for a surety or a pledge. The outer garment, you might say, it's like a sleeping bag almost. It's like they wore a sleeping bag. The outer garment, if taken pledge, was to be returned before sunset, because that's what you wrapped yourself up in to sleep. The prohibition was absolute in the case of a widow's garment. You couldn't take a widow's garment in a pledge. Or a millstone of either kind. What the person needed to make money, you couldn't take that as a surety or as a pledge against a loan. A creditor was forbidden to enter a house to claim a pledge. He was to stand outside until the borrower should come out to return it. You couldn't even force the issue. The original Roman law of debt permitted the debtor to be enslaved by his creditor until the debt was discharged. And he might even have been put to death by him. The Jewish law, although it did not forbid temporary bondage in the case of a debtor, did forbid a Hebrew debtor to be detained as a bondsman longer than 7 years, or at furthest, the year of Jubilee. In other words, you can only keep somebody locked up for their debt for 7 years at the most. And it did make much sense to me to lock somebody up that owed you money.
Yeah, so they can't provide. Their family probably had.
Maybe their family they're trying to twist the family's arm to get them to release the funds. I've seen this time to time. Anyway, yeah. Okay, here's the history part. So, let your caffeine kick in a little bit right here. I'm going to buzz through this. I got this from the Bible Knowledge Commentary, and I thought he did such a concise job of laying this out to bring us up to Paul's day from the Old Testament picture that we've just been looking at. This is after the Babylonian captivity, 586 BC. Kind of a historical background. Remember that Israel was taken into Babylon, 586 BC, because of their rebellion against God. And we read a little bit of Jeremiah last week and said, if you don't submit to Nebuchadnezzar, you're not submitting to me. I've taken you into this bondage, and this is my plan for you. But I have a plan beyond this, not a plan for harm, but a plan for good. And that's where all this ends up at. God actually took them into bondage so that he could actually change something within their hearts. God had promised Israel that if they obeyed him, he would bless them as a nation. If they did not, then he would judge them and cause them to be taken into captivity. That promise was repeated to Solomon with a specific application to his own life. If he, as king of Israel, obeyed the Lord, he would experience God's continual blessing. If Solomon did not obey him, God would take away his power and position as the king of Israel. As happened so frequently among many of Israelite leaders, a good beginning had an unfortunate ending. Solomon sinned against God, particularly by, who knows why? He had all kinds of women, foreign wives, and he worshipped their false gods. So the kingdom was split in 931 BC. The 10 northern tribes were initially ruled by Jeroboam, and the southern tribes, Judah and Benjamin, were ruled at first by Rehoboam. Both kingdoms, however, continued to be characterized by idolatry and immorality, and as God had forewarned, his hand of judgment fell on all Israel because of their sin. The northern kingdom fell first, and the people were taken into captivity by the Assyrians in 722 BC. The Babylonians brought about the fall of the southern kingdom in 586 BC. The Israelites of the northern kingdom were absorbed into Assyria and eventually into other cultures. However, the people of the southern kingdom, Benjamin and Judah, remained intact in Babylon. And after the power of Babylon was broken by the Medes and Persians in 539 BC, many Jews returned to their homeland. In 538 BC, the first group returned to Judah under the leadership of Zerubbabel. Over a period of years and tremendous opposition from Samaritans, the returnees eventually succeeded in rebuilding the temple in 515 BC. A number of years later, in 458 BC, you got to remember, anything before Christ, the number gets smaller, that means it's more current. It's kind of confusing at times. In 458 BC, a second group of Jews returned, led by Ezra. Arriving on the scene, they found the Jews in Israel in a state of spiritual and moral degradation. They had intermarried with the unbelieving peoples of the surrounding nations and were participating in their pagan practices. However, through Ezra's faithful teaching ministry, the majority of these people turned from their sins and once again followed God's will for their lives. In 444 BC, 14 years after Ezra's return to Jerusalem, Jeremiah also returned, and God used him to guide Judah in rebuilding the city walls and in reordering the people's social and economic lives. What he accomplished in a brief period of time was an incredible feat. How he accomplished this goal was one of the major emphases in the book that bears his name. Now, if you have a Bible, turn to Jeremiah chapter 5, and we're going to pick up the history lesson here and see how this one area of debt and loans affected the people and how changing what they had fallen into changed the way they related with each other and with God. Jeremiah 5:1. Now the men and their wives raised a great outcry against their Jewish brothers. Some were saying, "We and our sons and daughters are numerous. In order for us to eat and stay alive, we must get grain." In other words, there was a genuine need. They were hungry, and there was a lot of people. They had a big family, and there was a lot of hunger. Others were saying, we are mortgaging our fields, our vineyards, and our homes to get grain during the famine. There's a loan against an asset. They're mortgaging their fields. They still have a warranty deed. They still can use it and own it, but they don't own it because it's being used as leverage on a loan. Still others were saying, we have had to borrow money to pay the king's taxes on our fields and vineyards. King Artaxerxes, which is interesting when you look at his name, his name is spelled with T-A-X right in the middle of his name. Artaxerxes.
Are you in Jeremiah 5?
Yes. No, I'm sorry. Nehemiah 5. Did I say Jeremiah? Wow, that would really make a big difference. Yeah, I am so sorry. That would be in Nehemiah chapter 5.
I would see it if we were awake.
Yeah. What version are you reading out of, Lee? I understand. Nehemiah 5, 1 through 12. So, our sons and daughters are numerous. We got to eat. Others were mortgaging their fields. In verse 4 it says, still others were saying, we've had to borrow money to pay the king's taxes on our fields and vineyards. Property taxes, income taxes, business taxes, corporate taxes. Although we are the same flesh and blood as our countrymen, and though our sons are as good as theirs, yet we have to subject our sons and daughters to slavery. They had to go into slavery. I owe, so off to work I go. Not because I want to, not because it's what I want, not because it's my mission and my goal and my calling in life, but because I have to. I'm in slavery. Some of our daughters have already been enslaved, but we are powerless because our fields and our vineyards belong to others. Foreclosure. They're in hot water, and all because people weren't caring about each other the way they should. When I heard their outcry and these charges, I was very angry, Nehemiah says. I pondered them in my mind and then accused the nobles and officials. I told them, you are exacting usury interest from your own countrymen. So I called together a large meeting to deal with them. You see, the problem wasn't famine. The problem wasn't taxes. The problem was debt. Not, and more specifically, interest was the problem. I pondered them when I heard their cry, I was very angry. I pondered them in my mind and then accused the nobles and officials. I told them, you are exacting usury from your own countrymen. So I called together a large meeting to deal with them and said, as far as possible, we have brought back our Jewish brothers who were sold to the Gentiles. Now you are selling your brothers only for them to be sold back to us. They kept quiet because they could find nothing to say. So I continued. What you are doing is not right. Shouldn't you walk in the fear of our God to avoid the reproach of the Gentile enemies? I and my brothers and my men are also lending the people money and grain. But let the exacting of usury stop. Loan it to them without interest. Give them a chance to get on their feet. Interest is just adding 5 billion tons of weight upon the hardship the person's already suffering under. Give it back to them immediately. Give back to them immediately their fields, their vineyards, olive groves, and houses, and also the usury you are charging them. Now get this, the 100th part. How much interest were they being charged? What's the 100th part? 1%. And that was bad news.
Wow.
You ever got a 1% loan? I mean, yeah, try to do that. I'd like a 1% loan, please. The 100th part, the money, grain, new wine, and oil. Give them back what they need to live. Give them back what they need to pay you back. And forget the interest. Just let them get back on their feet. We're a community. We're all under God. We've got to work together if we're going to pull this thing together. We've got an enemy out here. We've got the Gentiles, the Samaritans. All these people are trying to ruin us. They don't want to see us get our temple rebuilt. They don't want to see our culture come back together. They want to see us ruined. And you're shooting yourself in the foot when you charge interest on a loan. We will give it back, they said, and we will not demand anything more from them. We will do as you say. Then I summoned the priests and made the nobles and officials take an oath to do what they had promised. The hook in debt is interest. When they were coming back to this difficult times, things were hard. There was opposition, and they were hurting each other with selfishness. Back to Romans chapter 13. Does Paul here prohibit any kind of debt? No, he doesn't. He doesn't prohibit it. What does Paul exhort? The repayment of debt. He says if you have debt, get it paid. Repay it. Why? Proverbs 22:7. Just as the rich rule over the poor, so the borrower is servant or a slave to the lender. You can't serve God and mammon at the same time. And interest is an incredibly perverted type of mammon. Anyway, debt enslaves us. And if we're to serve God, we need to not be slaves to a lender. Get out of debt is what I heard as I sit on my back porch. My business has been booming, and so had my credit, so had my debt load. Buy more equipment. It's tax deductible. That's always a justification for getting a new tractor. I mean, always is. Buy property. I'm told it will always go up in value. Leverage for as much as you can get. And then the 80s hit. Famine. There were only 2 competitors the year before. This year, there's 15 in the phone book. The cost of operations had increased. Health insurance for employees is skyrocketing. Business insurance doubled. Employment taxes were increasing. Numerous payments were unwelcome reminders of my stupidity. Where taxes had been manageable, now I was overwhelmed because of a change in the tax law and an unforeseen tax liability for business I had to give back, or for building I had to give back. I bought a new pump truck to pump septic tanks with, not a new one, but a used one, knowing that I was going to get an investment credit back at the end of the year. And that justified me getting this other piece of equipment. Unfortunately, about 3 months into the year, they changed the law and removed that tax credit. That was fun. I bought a business with my debt mentality over a 50-year contract at a real low payment that I could afford. I thought, well, that's better than renting. And it wasn't. I should have been renting. I would have been better off. And when the 80s hit, I realized there was no way that property values were dropping like this. And I had to give it back. And people I bought it from were very gracious, took it back, and later made a wonderful profit on it. So I was glad for that. My family was growing and greater needs as teens. My wife was feeling like I was no longer part of her life. My solution, work harder. God's solution, trust me and get out of debt. This was God's response to the anxiety I was feeling in my heart, literally. I was living in a home I could barely afford, wondering how I was going to make payments, employee taxes, income taxes, give to my church, provide for my family, and still have time for them. My solution before was work more hours, borrow more money. God's solution, get out of debt. The hook of interest, deductible or not, really hit me when I looked at my tax return and saw that $13,000 had been spent for interest. And I started to think about what I could have done with that money. Though the 80s were tough, they didn't hold a candle to what just happened here in the United States. What we didn't learn in the 80s, we're having to learn again in the new millennium in spades. Debt is disastrous. Okay, Lord, so how? You told me get out of debt. How do I do that? I can't hardly pay what I got. I'm just barely hanging on. And I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. So how am I supposed to do this? Well, the first thing was, humble yourself and trust me. Oh, you're right, Lord. I really thought I could work my way out the other end of this. I really thought that I could manipulate things. I could move things around and be able to work through it all. But I realize I can't. I need you. I'm sorry. I'm wrong. I need a new mindset. I need help. He said, you sure do, son. And so Greg Lather, my accountant, said, I want you to take Crown Ministries. So 1992, Susie and I submitted ourselves in humility to a class on finances. First thing I had to learn in this class was come to the realization that all this stuff was not mine. I am only a steward of God's stuff. It doesn't belong to me. And a steward is required to be faithful. That's the requirement God has on a steward. You have to be faithful. So I made it my goal in life to be faithful to God as his steward of everything in my life, including finances. God, anything that I have, anything that family, any relationships, they're all from you. And I want to be a faithful steward of everything that you've placed in my hands. I really don't even know how to do that, but that's what my heart is. That's what I want to do. Second, I had to come to grips with the fact that that having more stuff does not equate with having more happiness. Freedom and happiness seem to go together, but more stuff and happiness don't. Freedom and happiness seem to go together. The rich rule over the poor, the borrower is servant to the lender. If I'm a servant to a lender, how can I be fully a servant to God? I need freedom. Thirdly, I had to learn to appreciate my wife's impressions and intuition. So much so that we didn't make any financial decisions over $100 without agreement. I always relegated her ideas to some womanly, with no rational basis. And what God showed me, that when you put rationale and intuition together, you get a mighty force. And that's what's happened. And I shared that stuff with you guys before. After prayer and obedience, financial faithfulness includes accurate accounting. How do I get out? Accurate accounting. I didn't know anything about accounting. I learned accounting. Basics of accounting. I'm no bigwig of accounting, but I can do the basics. I never knew how much money I had to spend. If $1,000 came in, I kind of thought, well, I've got $1,000 to spend. Lee, you were really naive. Yes, I really was. And I hired other people to do my accounting for me, and when they showed me the books, I had no idea what I was looking at. I said, do we have money today? Yep. Okay. That's all I need to know. Do I need to work harder? Yeah, we'll work harder. Okay. No concept. My secretary accountant came to me one day and says, Lee, these people your employees are robbing you blind. Really? But I trust them. But I couldn't figure out how they were robbing me. I was that dumb when it came to finances. Didn't know anything about accounting. In Crown Ministries, they taught me accounting. Write down every penny that you spend. Every penny that you spend. I had to carry around a little piece of paper in my pocket. Candy bar, 50 cents. Whatever it was. And write down everything that comes in. Okay. If what you're spending is more than what you are bringing in, something needs to change. You have two options. Reduce what you're spending or make more money. But you can't live like this for very long without it coming crashing down on you. You got to live here. You got to live in balance. Actually, it should be like this. So you have more income coming in than what's going out. And that's our goal, okay? The fourth week in Crown Ministries was the most brutal. That's the one you walked out of when you realized that you were spending $400 a month more than what you were bringing in. That was, people, they walk in like this, ready for the class, was like, I can't believe, now what do I do? I'm spending more than what can I do about it? Well, that's where you need to be. You've got to come to a place where you realize that there has to be a change. So what you do is you make a budget. You write out a budget, a doable budget. Not a super restrictive budget, but a doable budget. You budget for fun. You budget for savings. You budget for giving. You budget for food and grocery and clothing and transportation, all those things. You budget for everything. And you use the whole past year's records to determine how much you should put in your budget so that you get a bigger picture, a better picture. You adhere to this budget, and its budget has specific goals. It has goals for a rainy day fund, for savings. If you don't have a savings, if you don't have some money in savings, what do you have to do when the tires wear out on the car? Borrow. Go back into debt again. So what you have to do is start setting aside money for a rainy day. Do you think there will ever be a rainy day? Yeah, you just count on it. It's just glorious when there isn't a rainy day. That's my life. Giving. Set a goal for giving. Typical Christians give somewhere under 2%. That's typical. Why? Because they're in debt. Because they're spending everything they've got just to survive. So we set a goal for giving. Investing. I need to have some investments for my future. I'm not going to be a young, capable, strong guy that can just go out there and work more. I'm going to get old. Like Bev and I are turning another year older on the 29th. Woo-hoo. I can't do the stuff I used to do, or at least not for very long. Investing. Another big one was learning to be content with what I had. Paul says in Philippians 4, I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you have renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you have been concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. In other words, the Philippians were trying to give a gift. I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I have learned to be content in whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. Contentment. That kept me away from buying the next extreme lap. You know what I'm saying? Work. My mom's cure for being broke is a 4-letter word. W-O-R-K. Mom, I need gas for my old pickup that my dad gave me that I could drive around the field. Can I have some money? Sure. Go out and mow the lawn. Go out and mow the neighbor's lawn. Go out and stack some firewood. Go out and do this. Go out and do that. She always had the 4-letter solution to my poverty. Work the plan to get out of debt. Make it your ideal focus. Make it your center focus. Get out of debt. Work hard. Rest easy. You don't work hard all the time. You got to rest too. Work with integrity and with honesty. When I started teaching Crown Ministries later, after it had such an impact on us, my daughter took the class and she worked for me. And she got so convicted about the week on honesty, she'd evidently taken a stamp and she had used it for her own personal stuff. She felt so convicted, she bought a whole book of stamps to replace it. That's honesty. That's integrity. And that's the kind of integrity we need, not only personally, but nationally. I pray we get it. We'll see. Honesty. Watch God work on your behalf and exceed every expectation. And I've told you this before. We set up a debt reduction graph. And I had it very accurately pinned out so that if nothing ever changed, we would be out of debt in a certain period of time. And as we made that our focus, what happened was that our debt went just like this. Boom. It should have been out here. It went boom like that. And at age 49, Susie and I were completely debt-free. It took us just a few years. Because what happened is God added to our efforts his wonderful blessing. We put in $1, he puts in 20. It's amazing to watch how he came along and honored our goal of being a servant to him instead of a servant to the lender. That's what he honored, I believe, in our lives. He showed us that in order to get out of debt, if you're really serious about it, you got to use what you have to reach the goal. Remember the story about Elisha, where he came into a woman's home and he asked, what do you have in the house, for food? She said, all I got is this little bit of oil. And Elisha says, well, go around and ask all your neighbors for their empty jars. Don't ask for just a few. Ask for a lot of them. Then go inside, shut the door behind you and your sons, pour oil into all the jars, and then each is filled, put it on one side. She left him, and afterwards shut the door behind her and her sons, and they brought the jars to her, and she kept pouring. When all the jars were full, she said to her son, "Bring me another one." But he replied, "There's no jars left." For the oil stopped, then the oil stopped flowing. She went and told the man of God and said, She went and told the man of God, and he said, "Go sell the oil, pay your debts, you and your sons can live on what is left." God wants to use what we have, whether it's talents or assets or whatever. He is going to cause that to multiply in ways that not only takes care of your debts, but he's going to take care of you on a day-to-day basis and give you a future hope. The other part of being faithful is giving. Giving is faith in action. We set an initial attainable goal with the goal of increasing our giving once we attain the last goal. Once we attain this, we set a new one. We didn't stay there. We popped it back up, popped it back up, popped it back up. We kept doing that. Ultimately, our giving is not directed by a plan any longer, but by a voice. But by a voice. We so far exceeded what our goals were in giving that we just listen now. And it seems like the more I give, the more God pours back into us, and I can't figure it out. I don't know how he does that. But giving is an incredible thing. When you help the poor, it helps you. That's what we don't understand. Being generous, being open-handed, it helps. And allows God to trust you. Because when he sees your generosity of heart, when he sees your faith in him expressed through giving, he says, "Lord, you gave me this stuff and I know you've got more, so I'm going to give it." He says, "Right on, son. That's exactly what I'm going to do." And he sees that and he trusts us and he puts more into our capable hands as his stewards. Save. Saving's part of being faithful. Catastrophic events happen, and if you have no reserves, you are again in a position of having to borrow. Having savings in cash dollars, we have cash and savings in dollars, in paper dollars, and fiat, fake money, because it's what we use right now in this thing. But we also have metal. We've got some savings in precious metals, because those things don't change. Like Barry's fond of saying, you can still buy the same amount of gas for a silver dollar as you could as now, because of the value of it. It stays pretty much the same. We have savings in food. We have a storage pantry with some food in it. Not a lot, but we have enough that if things got difficult for a while, we'd have some food to eat and maybe some to give away. We've saved in terms of having a garden. I look at a garden like a savings account. I look at tools as a savings account. I look at a lot of things, or an investment maybe would be a better way to say it. What you save, you don't pay taxes on. I always thought going out there, work harder, make more money. The trouble with that is that the government gets half of it. Half of it. That's where my tax liability was when I had a business. 50% went to the government. And so if I saved $1, I didn't have to pay taxes on that. So if I shut the lights off, or if I did something to save $1, I didn't have to pay taxes on that, reduce my liability. I was able to get more. I am very much aware that we're supposed to pay our taxes, but I'm not going to pay any more taxes than I have to. I'm going to find every possible means of writing off everything I have. So having a business, I can write off a lot of things. And I'll get into that a little bit more. And I'm sorry I'm taking so long. Is this okay?
Yeah.
Okay, hang in there. Just got a little bit more to go here. This is really important to me. I really see how debt and interest affects the church and how their effectiveness in this realm is affected by that. Investing. When I say invest, what's the first thing you think of?
Stock market.
Stock market. Do you think the stock market is a good place to invest money?
No.
Why do I see so many people doing this? I don't know. It may have been at one point, and we were trained. With this training, you buy and you let it sit. Right. It's always going to get bigger.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that was fine when there was a gold standard and when inflation wasn't at 12 and 14%. Oh, they tell you it's at 4?
Yeah.
That has to be a lie.
Yeah.
Okay. It's much higher than that. So consequently, whatever you invest in, if it's not producing at least what inflation is, you're going backwards. I believe this less and less likely in the light of computer technology that takes investing out of human hands and makes it happen at the speed of light, that you can actually do the stock market. I mean, it's like going to a casino. Every once in a while, you hear somebody hit the ka-ching. I don't, because I never go to a casino. That's one of the other principles of faithfulness. Don't blow it by wasting it on gambling. Anyway, ka-ching, because that one person that wins all that money energizes everybody else to throw more cash into the slot machines. It's like multi-level marketing. There's always a couple of people at the top that make it big, and they're always the ones that you're focused on. I'm going to be just like, and you're down there, you got a garage full of junk, and you can't sell it to anybody because it's triple the price of anything else. And believe me, I've been down those roads. You're going to get quick or rich quick if you just do this multi-level. Can't you see how the things all stay? Oh yeah, makes sense. Doesn't work. All those stock market investments can be gone that fast, literally, at the speed of light. Susie and I lost some money back in called Black Monday back in the 80s. I don't know if you guys remember that. It wasn't a lot, but it was a lot to us. It was like $8,000. And we lost a large portion of that, panicked out, pulled it out, and of course then it went back up, and if we left it in, it would have been okay. Anyway, the stock market to me, I just don't like. I like something I can get my hands on and hold. And so what really works for us, let me say this. My original thinking about investing was to create this huge nest egg that I could pull from when I get older. But my vision of that kind of changed with inflation and all the factors that come in to diminish that lump sum. What we finally decided was what's more important would be an ongoing monthly income from an investment. And what worked for us was rentals. They give us a pretty consistent source of monthly income. I can depreciate the buildings over time. I can write off all my expenses, my mileage to and from, my telephone. It's a business. I can lower my tax liability, which gives me more usable income, more income to share, more income to, if I need to get something, I can get something, I get a new ladder. Historically, property appreciates over time, so it's likely that it's going to appreciate and somewhat keep up with inflation, I'm hoping. And if I can't manage them because I get too old or too infirmed, I can always hire that out to be done for 10%. And I can pass the whole thing on to my children and my grandchildren as a business, avoiding inheritance taxes. So it really worked out. This has seemed to working out for us pretty well. Maybe you sell something. Have you ever considered selling something on a contract rather than be the bank yourself? We did that, and we've got a 20 years worth of income at 8% interest on a property we sold at one of the top of the bubble. And that's an income that we'll see pretty much for the rest of our lives. People say, well, I don't like renters. You should love renters. You should love renters. They're paying for your property, and they're putting food on your table. And you know what? It only takes a couple hours a month as a landlord for me to deal with stuff. Now, true, the air conditioning went out, and it cost me $229 to get it fixed. Big deal. Invest in tools, invest in your abilities, invest in your thinking, invest in your community, invest in your relationships, because guys, we need each other. We see that in the Old Testament, they needed each other, they were community. And God said, there's going to be times when you can't help yourself up. And you're going to need somebody to reach over there and help you out, help you through a tough spot. And then you're going to have the opportunity to do that for somebody. So invest in your community, invest in your church, invest in your relationships. What can I do personally, even if I live in a nation under the curse? Get out of debt. If there's one thing you can do, get out of debt. You limit your exposure to loss, and you make it possible to help the truly poor. Get out of debt. That's my exhortation to you. That's the exhortation from Paul. Get out of debt, stay out of debt. Now there's a lot more we could talk about, but the general principle is lower that debt load so you can be free. And when there's freedom, there's happiness. And where there's freedom, there's the ability to do the things you want to do instead of the things you have to do. I felt God's calling to be a pastor. There was no way that I could live as a pastor on the income that's generated by being a pastor. Most pastors, require living in a parsonage or having some other source of income or a huge church or a denominational backing. That's not the case. I wanted to invest in my community. I wanted to invest in Sam Valley, and this opportunity came up, and I said, Lord, this is it. This is where I want to be. And because God had worked in other areas of our lives, it made it possible, practical for us to be part of this community. I am just so thankful to the Lord because, folks, I was on a path of absolute destruction. I was headed down the wrong path fast. And God turned me around when he said, on that platform, he said, get out of debt. And he said it through a friend of mine. He says, Lee, have you ever thought about getting out of debt? Wow. I am so glad that God put it in my heart to do so. And I pray that it'll set you free. We have a debt that we can never repay. That's the debt to Christ. Because he gave his life for us. And we can never repay that. I'm thankful that he works in our lives that way. Father, I know this didn't sound much like a Jesus sermon, but I think it is. Because you want us to be in a position to be able to serve you. To be able to do what you ask us to do. You want us to be faithful stewards of the things that you've given us. You want us to take good care of the things you've given us, Lord. Lord, I look at my old pickup out there and I think, oh, you've got to be frowning. I haven't washed that thing in a month. You want us to be good stewards of the things that you trust into our hands. If I won't take care of the things you've given me, the Lord, I just know that you're going to trust me with anything else. So Lord, help me in that. Help me to be faithful. God, we're in a terrible situation in our country right now, in the world. We have relied upon debt. Interest has been a horrible hook. And it's been destroying this world. Been destroying the nations of this world. And Lord, I don't know where else to go except to you. And ask you, Father, to put upon the hearts of those who are in leadership in our country to resist going into debt, to make the hard decisions, to turn it around, not to fall into the trap, the destruction of debt. Father, we ask you to do this in Jesus' name. Thank you. Lord, I want to pray for Judy and Mike and ask you, Lord, to sustain them and to heal them in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. So I kept you way